Alphonse Gabriel Capone, better known as Al Capone, is a name that echoes through the annals of American history. His story is one of ambition, power, crime, and an indelible mark on the early 20th century American landscape. Born into an era of Prohibition, his life encapsulates the turbulent times when the United States grappled with laws banning the production and sale of alcohol. This is the tale of how an ambitious young man from a modest background rose to become one of the most infamous mobsters in history. Al Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York, to Gabriele and Teresa Capone. His parents were Italian immigrants who had come to America seeking a better life. They settled in a bustling, diverse neighborhood filled with fellow immigrants, all chasing the American dream. Gabriele, a barber by trade, worked diligently to provide for his large family. Despite their humble means, the Capones instilled strong values in their children. Young Alphonse, or Al as he was commonly known, was a bright and ambitious child. He attended school like any other boy his age, but the streets of Brooklyn soon became his real classroom. The neighborhood was rife with gangs and petty crime, and it wasn't long before Al found himself drawn into this world. School didn't hold his interest for long, and he dropped out in the 6th grade after hitting a teacher. The streets were a rough education, but Al was a quick learner. He began running errands for local gangs, doing odd jobs, and slowly gaining their trust. It was during this time that he met Johnny Torrio, a significant figure in his life who would later become his mentor and guide into the world of organized crime. By his late teens, Capone was fully immersed in the gang lifestyle. He started working for the 5 Points Gang, a notorious New York City organization. Torrio, recognizing Capone's potential, took him under his wing. Capone's reputation grew as he proved himself to be a resourceful and ruthless enforcer. In 1919, Torrio moved to Chicago to help run the operations of his uncle, Big Jim Colosimo, and he took Capone with him. Chicago, with its booming economy and rampant corruption, was ripe for organized crime. The city was a melting pot of immigrants and cultures, creating a fertile ground for illicit activities. Capone started off by managing Torrio's establishments, learning the ropes of the business. He quickly adapted to the new environment, using his street smarts and brute force to climb the ranks. When Prohibition came into effect in 1920, banning the sale and production of alcohol, it presented a golden opportunity for the enterprising young gangster. Prohibition was a double-edged sword for America. On one hand, it aimed to reduce crime and corruption, but on the other, it gave rise to a new breed of criminals who saw immense profit in bootlegging. Capone, under Torrio's tutelage, seized this opportunity with both hands. They established a vast network of speakeasies, breweries, and distilleries, raking in enormous profits. Torrio's operations flourished, and so did Capone's influence. The young gangster's reputation as a shrewd businessman and a ruthless enforcer spread far and wide. In 1925, after surviving an assassination attempt, Torrio decided to retire and handed over the reins to Capone. At just 26 years old, Al Capone found himself at the helm of Chicago's most powerful criminal organization. Capone's leadership style was a mix of charisma, cunning, and brutality. He knew how to charm the media and the public, often presenting himself as a benefactor to the community. He funded soup kitchens during the Great Depression, attended public events, and portrayed himself as a man of the people. But beneath this facade was a ruthless mobster who would stop at nothing to maintain his power. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was the 4th of 9 children born to Gabriele and Teresa Capone. The Capone family lived in a small apartment in the Navy Yard section of Brooklyn, a neighborhood that was predominantly Italian, but also included a mix of other immigrant communities. Gabriele Capone worked as a barber, while Teresa took care of the household. Life was hard, but the Capones were a close-knit family. From an early age, Al showed signs of intelligence and ambition. However, the harsh realities of immigrant life in Brooklyn meant that he was often exposed to violence and crime. The streets of Brooklyn were teeming with gangs, and young Al found himself increasingly drawn to this lifestyle. His formal education was cut short after he was expelled from school for striking a teacher, but his real education was just beginning on the streets. Johnny Torrio, a key figure in Al Capone's early life, was a well-established gangster with a reputation for being both shrewd and ruthless. Torrio saw potential in the young Capone and took him under his wing. Under Torrio's mentorship, Capone learned the intricacies of organized crime. Torrio's approach to crime was businesslike, focusing on profitability and minimizing unnecessary violence, a philosophy that Capone would later adopt and adapt. In 1919, Torrio moved to Chicago to assist his uncle, Big Jim Colosimo, in running his criminal empire. Recognizing Capone's potential, Torrio invited him to join him in Chicago. This move marked the beginning of Capone's meteoric rise in the world of organized crime. Chicago in the 1920s was a city of contrasts. It was a booming metropolis with a rapidly growing population, a thriving economy, and a vibrant cultural scene. However, it was also a city rife with corruption, crime, and political instability. Prohibition, which came into effect in 1920, banned the production, sale, and distribution of alcohol, but it also created a lucrative black market for bootleggers and gangsters. The city was divided into territories controlled by various gangs, each vying for dominance in the lucrative bootlegging business. Violence and turf wars were common, and the police and politicians were often on the payroll of the highest bidder. It was into this volatile environment that Al Capone arrived in 1919. Big Jim Colosimo was one of Chicago's most powerful crime bosses, controlling a vast network of brothels, gambling dens, and speakeasies. When Johnny Torrio arrived in Chicago, he quickly became Colosimo's right-hand man. Torrio brought Capone into the fold, and the young gangster soon proved his worth. However, Colosimo was resistant to expanding into the bootlegging business, preferring to stick to his established operations. This reluctance created tension between him and Torrio. In May 1920, Colosimo was assassinated, and Torrio took over his empire. Many believed that Torrio had orchestrated the hit, with Capone's assistance, to eliminate Colosimo and take control of the organization. With Colosimo out of the way, Torrio and Capone set about expanding their bootlegging operations. They established a sophisticated network of breweries, distilleries, and distribution channels, supplying illegal alcohol to speakeasies and private clients across Chicago. The profits were enormous, and Capone's influence grew rapidly. Capone's approach to business was ruthless but calculated. He understood the importance of alliances and often used diplomacy and bribery to achieve his goals. However, he was not afraid to use violence when necessary. Under his leadership, the organization eliminated rival gangs and expanded its territory. By the mid-1920s, the Capone organization was a well-oiled machine. It was structured like a legitimate business, with various departments responsible for different aspects of the operation. Capone had a team of trusted lieutenants and enforcers who ensured that the business ran smoothly and that any threats were swiftly dealt with. Capone's headquarters were located in the Lexington Hotel, a luxurious establishment that also served as a safe house and meeting place for his associates. The hotel was heavily guarded, and Capone rarely ventured out without a convoy of bodyguards. Al Capone was acutely aware of the power of public perception. Despite his criminal activities, he worked hard to cultivate an image as a benevolent and charitable figure. He funded soup kitchens during the Great Depression, provided assistance to struggling families, and made substantial donations to various charities. These acts of philanthropy endeared him to many ordinary Chicagoans, who saw him as a Robin Hood-like figure. Capone's charm and charisma also made him a media darling. He gave interviews to journalists, attended public events, and even posed for photographs. His ability to manipulate the media helped to humanize him in the eyes of the public, despite his well-known criminal activities. One of the most infamous events associated with Al Capone was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre on February 14, 1929. This brutal attack saw 7 members of the rival Moran gang gunned down in a garage on Chicago's North Side. The massacre was widely believed to have been orchestrated by Capone in an attempt to eliminate his competition. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre shocked the nation and brought increased scrutiny to Capone's activities. While he was never directly linked to the crime, the public outcry and media frenzy surrounding the event tarnished his image and heightened law enforcement's determination to bring him to justice. Despite his efforts to bribe and intimidate law enforcement, Capone could not evade justice forever. The federal government, under the leadership of President Herbert Hoover, intensified efforts to take down Capone. Treasury agent Elliot Ness and his team, known as the Untouchables, were tasked with gathering evidence against him. Ness and his team focused on Capone's financial dealings, meticulously documenting his income and expenditures. Their efforts paid off, and in 1931, Capone was indicted on charges of tax evasion. The trial was highly publicized, and despite his attempts to bribe and intimidate the jury, he was found guilty. Al Capone's trial for tax evasion in 1931 was a significant turning point in his life. The federal government, having amassed substantial evidence of his illicit income, presented a compelling case against him. Despite Capone's attempts to manipulate the outcome through bribery and intimidation, the trial proceeded under intense public scrutiny. The prosecution, led by U.S. Attorney George E.Q. Johnson, argued that Capone had evaded taxes on millions of dollars of income from his various illegal enterprises. The evidence included detailed financial records and testimony from key witnesses. Capone's defense team, despite their efforts to discredit the prosecution's case, struggled to counter the overwhelming evidence. On October 17, 1931, Capone was found guilty of tax evasion and several other charges. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, fined $50,000, and ordered to pay $215,000 in back taxes. The verdict marked a significant victory for law enforcement and a devastating blow to Capone's criminal empire. Capone's imprisonment began at the U.S. Penitentiary in Atlanta, but his influence and ability to bribe guards soon became apparent. To prevent him from continuing his criminal activities behind bars, authorities transferred him to the newly opened Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco Bay in 1934. Alcatraz, known for its harsh conditions and strict security, was a far cry from the luxurious lifestyle Capone had enjoyed. The isolation and regimentation of life on the rock took a severe toll on his health. Capone's untreated syphilis, which he had contracted years earlier, began to progress, leading to mental and physical deterioration. During his time at Alcatraz, Capone's once formidable presence faded. He spent much of his time in the prison hospital suffering from paresis, a condition caused by late-stage syphilis. By the time he was released in 1939, Capone was a shadow of his former self. After his release from prison, Al Capone retreated to his mansion on Palm Island, Florida. His health continued to decline, and he lived a relatively quiet life, far removed from the violence and power struggles of his earlier years. His once vast criminal empire had crumbled, and he spent his remaining years in seclusion, cared for by his family. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone died of a stroke and pneumonia. He was 48 years old. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy as one of America's most notorious gangsters lived on. Al Capone's story has been immortalized in countless books, movies, and television shows. His larger-than-life persona, combined with his undeniable charisma and ruthless tactics, has made him a cultural icon. However, the myth of Al Capone often overshadows the reality of his life. Capone was a product of his time, a period marked by prohibition, economic disparity, and widespread corruption. His rise to power was facilitated by a combination of ambition, cunning, and a willingness to use violence. While he presented himself as a benevolent figure, providing for the community and helping the needy, his empire was built on fear, exploitation, and crime. Al Capone's influence on organized crime in America was profound. He demonstrated the profitability of bootlegging and other illegal enterprises, setting a precedent for future crime syndicates. His business-like approach to organized crime, with a focus on efficiency and profitability, became a model for other mobsters. Capone's downfall also highlighted the importance of targeting the financial underpinnings of criminal organizations. The federal government's successful prosecution of Capone for tax evasion set a precedent for future efforts to combat organized crime through financial investigations and prosecutions. Al Capone's legacy extends beyond the realm of organized crime. He has become a symbol of the excesses and contradictions of the Prohibition era. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrupting influence of power. Despite his criminal activities, Capone's charisma and larger-than-life persona have made him a fascinating figure in popular culture. From movies like The Untouchables to numerous biographies and documentaries, his life continues to captivate the public imagination. Al Capone's life is a complex tapestry of ambition, power, crime, and downfall. His rise from the streets of Brooklyn to the pinnacle of organized crime in Chicago is a testament to his cunning and ruthlessness. However, his story is also a reminder of the destructive power of crime and corruption. Capone's life and legacy serve as a lens through which we can examine the broader social, economic, and political dynamics of early 20th century America. His story is a stark reminder of the dark side of the American dream and the enduring impact of one man's quest for power.